right? So now let's do the main event. Let's take input from the user, right? One would say that I can do this in the main script. I can just create a main script like the one we are going to create in just a minute right now, and just take the inputs inside of it. And based on the inputs, just see whatever methods that you want to invoke from the account object that we will create, right? I'm going to create a what we call a UI class that's going to take all of the inputs. You don't have to do that. I'm just doing this for the purpose in refactoring into ECB later on, right? In the next video, right? And that's basically corresponds to having some GUI or something. So if you have a GUI or something, that's basically what will happen. You'll have a GUI class that's going to take all of the inputs, right? So that's typically what will happen, right? So this is the convention that I'm going to follow. Once we finish with the actual main classes, to me personally, I don't find that there is a need to work on the Jupyter notebook anymore. So I'm just going to work on the actual classes that we have built so far, and I'm just gonna take this to the right, like that. And now I'm going to create a script. I'm just going to call it main.py. We can just call it bootstrap.py as well. And bootstrap here means that this is the file that connects everything together, right? Or this is the main loop, for example, right? So that's the bootstrap file. And I'm going to create a UI class. Just kind of call it UI or UITerminal, for example. UITerminal. Now that class, where does it fit into our Lucy chart? So let us do the following. It's gonna do this right there. Okay. We updated this as well. I forgot to update that. Update. The actual class diagram that has the types and stuff, I'm going to update this in the document of that case study. But for the time being, let's just have these methods without specific signatures and without specific return types, right? What did we do? We said that this is going to be a class method, and that's all I think, right? Okay. Let's have the UITerminal class. Terminal. All right. Let's say that the basic thing that the UITerminal would be having is displaying all of the options. What are the functionality that I can do, right? I can create an account, I can log in, I can log out, right? So let's say that it has a display options, right? And this basically just prints stuff, right? So it returns void, and typically it should have an object from account, since this is going to be continuously invoking login and logout or create. It's gonna invoke all of the functionality that any account can have, right? So it should have an object of account inside of it, sent to it, right? So this needs to be associated with account. Okay, so that's the kind of association that we have here. This is gonna get bigger in just a minute. Okay, so let's say that it contains an object of account of type account, right? Like that. And what else do we have? Let's just take it step by step, all right? So let's say that this is your UITerminal. And one would say, why didn't you do that? Why didn't you say something like from account, import account, and why didn't you just create an account right, inside that specific class or object UITerminal pool of instances like this. Why did you do that? If I did this, this is gonna be composition, right? And composition is the reason for all of the high coupling. So this is not gonna be typically like this. This is gonna be something like that, right? And that's typically this this class is highly coupled on the account. And from a logical point of view, I don't think that this fits composition so much. You can consider, yeah, you can say that no, it doesn't fit composition, to be honest. Like if there is no UI, there would still be the system, right? There would be still the system. So I don't think that this is logically composition, and I don't want to have it composition to not enforce the high coupling thing that we want to avoid, right? So I'm just gonna set this as association as it was. So if I have the account object, I can access it, right? So there's a role name which is account object here. So let's just have this as normal association where the actual object is gonna be created elsewhere. And elsewhere, I mean by it in the main.py. This is the actual main.py, like that. If the bootstrap is name thing is confusing you, it's just the main file, right? So here, the account object is going to be created elsewhere in the main file and sent to that file, sent to that object UITerminal object, and I'm going to take it and assign it like that, right? So let's talk about the display options here. Let's say define display options, and display options typically is going to do the following. Let's say that we want to check if the user is logged in or not. Like, remember again, if I'm logged in, I will see something like logout, right? And if I was not logged in, I would see something like create account or log in, right? I wouldn't see logout. So the view here gets different, and from that point we're gonna refactor, by the way, in the future into UI new user and UI existing user, right? So we are going to refactor this as following. Let's say that this is the display options, right? So let's say something like like that. Okay, and let's say enter one of the commands in the brackets, right? Of course, if you're talking about a chatbot, you wouldn't give him that, that simple option, right? So your chatbot needs to be semi-intelligent enough to accept a couple of words, and from that kind of word, it detects the intent and so on, right? So let's say that we are going to have something like either to log in, right, or to create an account. So this is to log in, right? And we can also give him something to create an account, right? Now notice something here. The view or this print statement should be different based on the current status of that user. If he's logged in, if he's not logged in, he should be able to either create an account or log in, right? So let's say that if that account object dot check logged in, I hope we wrote it like that. I think we wrote it as, I don't know the syntax. Yeah, check logged in. Yes, all right. If this is true, if this is not true, then we would give him the option either to register or to log in, right? So all of this is going to be intended. Else, if he is logged in, then we will tell him there is no create account here, and maybe for the time being we will just give him the option to log out, right? So allow. Okay, and doing so, let's have a look at the bootstrap or the main.py. This is where all of the imports happen there, and all of as well object creations happens here, right? So let's say from account I'm going to, or you know what, all right, from account let's import from account, import account, and from UITerminal import UITerminal, right? And we are going to create an account object. It's just going to be a single account object that is going to be passed all over the system, right? And I'm going to create a terminal object. Let's call this UI, right? And this is my main loop here, so I'm just going to say welcome to the cinema reservation system. Right, for the time being, this is the first part where we finish the login and sign up system. So I'm going to have a replay as none, and while that reply, I'm sorry, what did I say, replay is not equal to exit, right? So I'm going to tell him something like let's say to exit type exit. Okay, so if the reply is not exit, so we would want to start by first of all, let's make a small timer here. Let's say import time to just have a simple delay. So time.sleep and give it something like half a second, and then we would say UI.display options from that UI object. So we're going to display options, and let's say that what will happen next. Let's see. All right, so let's take an input from the user after showing him the menu. That after that, one of these menus should be displayed. So let's take an input from him. Let's take a command from him, right? So let's say that we are going to take a command from the user. What I want to do is something like that. So for example, I want to have this small caret symbol, right? And I want him to enter something like li, li, lo, ca, create, yani وكده, right? So what I want to do is that I want to label the kind of state that the user is in. Like, for example, if the user is logged in and he wants, for example, remember that this is a movie reservation, so the user should be able to view movies and stuff. So I want to have some kind of a prompt that tells the user if he's logged in as who, right? You know, some systems have this by default. Some systems have something like on the top bar it's gonna tell you that logged in as Kaza, logged in as Ahmed, logged in as Muhammad, right? So we want to have the same kind of labeling here, like telling you if you're logged in as whatever, right? So this is the kind of prompt that I'm looking for in my input, right? So where can we get that prompt? Well, that prompt can be actually an attribute on the UI object. So I can go to the UI object and say that I have something called the prompt attribute and set this by none, right? So if the guy is not logged in, if it's not logged in, so prompt is going to be reset into none again, right? Or let us set it to something like empty string, because I'm afraid that this is, I'm gonna tell you why in a second, right? And and if he was logged in, then we are going to say self prompt is going to be equal to that kind of prompt that we want to label the user with, right? So we're gonna say something like logged in or logged in as something like the actual username, right? The actual username, right? So that's an if string from account object dot account object. Get me that guy's username, like that. Okay. Okay. So as a matter of fact, why not just initialize none as empty string? There is no need for none here. Now let's have another method that gets you the prompt actually. Get prompt, and let's just return self.prompt like that. And let's say that this is going to have, right? So we're gonna have a prompt that we can show whether it's logged in as, let's say logged. I just want to have whether logged in as, right? So either this is the prompt or that the prompt. In either cases, that's just an attribute. That's just an attribute in the UITerminal object, right? So from the UITerminal object, I'm gonna say get prompt. I think I named it the same thing. It's get prompt, yeah. And yeah, I'm gonna store this inside reply. So so we are going to have one of these commands like li or lo or ca for the time being, right? So these are the kind of commands that we are showing to the user. Okay, now what I'm going to do next doesn't have to be exactly the same. You can handle your own inputs the way you see fit. You don't even have to have UITerminal class, but I just want to do this for consistency. And when we refactor into ECB, this would look a little bit making sense that like that this is the boundary and stuff like that, just to have a boundary in my system or a boundary class. And remember, for those who don't remember, the controller is what takes an input from the boundary or takes an input from the user and go do something in the database file. It checks something in the database file. It updates something in the database file. That's a controller. Database or a model or an entity is just the stored data. That's it, like the account here, like this, the intents, like the movies and the system, right? So one would say I can have all of this in my bootstrap file. I can all of these stuff, I can handle it in the main.py. All right, that's fine, that's totally fine. You can do that, right? So you don't have to follow this exactly the same, since this typically this exact class, the UITerminal or the UI boundary class, is going to be different from one product to the other. I'm just showing you different ways of dealing or different ways of thinking of how can you make a UITerminal or a UI boundary class, right? So once the command is being sent, just for debugging purposes, I just want to see what kind of command did the user enter, right? So accordingly, I can say something. Let's say that I'm going to handle the command first, and I'm going to handle the inputs first. What I mean by input is that, like, handle the command would be, what if that command happened? Then I would just print a simple statement, a simple print statement, right? So that following method, someone would say that it's kind of irrelevant. It's not that important, but I'm just gonna keep it there, right? So handle command is going to do the following. Okay. So again, I just want to emphasize on thinking about your scope of the project. Do I need to have a UITerminal? I want you to think about this stuff, you and your team, a little bit. Do we have to have a boundary class? Are we good without it? If we are going to do it, is it the same? Is it not? It depends on your actual project. And really take in mind that the actual chatbot in the actual project, you wouldn't typically, as a user, entering something like that CA or li. In a chatbot kind of project, you are going to be entering a sentence, a couple of words, and from these words you need to check or to trigger a specific intent that triggers the login or that triggers account. So you're gonna have, if we're talking about a class diagram, you're gonna have an extra layer there. Let's say that for those groups who I have made a meeting with, you're gonna see that I made a class that is called text processing before this, or maybe after the UI. There's gonna be a class in between that's called text processing that is going to detect the intent. It's gonna go to the intent class, right? Once the intent is detected, now the intent is going to trigger the actual methods from the account class if I want to log in or create account, and so on, right? So the handle command will take a reply, and I'm just gonna take that reply and I'm just going to normalize it. And let's do the following. Let's say if the reply is equal to LA, I don't have LA, CA, then I'm just going to return something like creating account needs email, username, and password, right? So enter a username, a password, and email, right? Like that. LF, let's just copy this all over and over. So if you wanted to log in, then enter a username and a password. If he wanted, or the user wanted to log out, then we can just say logging out. And finally, what if he enters something that is completely irrelevant? Then we're going to say unknown command. All right, so this is the handle the command. And what is next, right? What is next? So let's see. All right, actually, how about we store the actual command in an attribute inside that object? So let's say that this reply, right, it's going to be stored. I'm going to track the command that the user has been entered. I'm going to save it as well in the objects pool of variable. So I'll be having an attribute that is called self command. All right, and I'm going to take that reply and update the command with it. I'm just going to change every reply variable. No. Like that. And that's handle command. Let's see what is next. All right, so now let's add a method. That's where your actual question will be raised, like why do we have everything separated like that? I'm going to have a method that's called handle inputs. Like say for example that the user entered CA, right? And I detected that this is the command. First of all, handle command is going to show him this totally unimportant message that can actually, all of this actually can be inside handle inputs. But for some reason I'm doing this, right? So that's totally fine, that's no problem, right? I'm just having I'm separating for some reason. I don't even know why am I doing that, but you can totally take all of this content and put it in handle inputs, right? So let's say that handle inputs will do the following. Handle inputs is going to check the current command. So let's in the main script, let's say that I will see the reply or take the reply as an input from the user and see what command would it. Okay, so I'm gonna take that reply and send it to handle commands to figure out what kind of command should we update the self.command with. So I'm going to call handle command, and I'm going to send that reply that the user entered right? And I'm going to save this inside cmd or command, right? And based on the command, if the command is there, meaning that the user didn't enter just a white space and hit enter, there is a command, and that command is not equal to that situation here, it's not equal to unknown command, meaning that it's one of these, right? We are going to start and taking inputs. For example, if the command was found to be something like create account, then we would start to handle that input for example, creating an account, right? So what would handle input do? Let's say here if self.command that we have assigned and updated in the handle command, it's called handle command, right? Okay, so if self command was found to be equal to CA or create account, then I would start taking inputs regarding username, password, and email, right? So I'm going to invoke self.create account inputs. You're gonna ask yourself, where is this? That's a good question because I'm going to create it right away. By the way, this class is going to be a little bit jammed, and you're gonna see that you already see that this is not coherent at all. There is what we call low coherence here, or low cohesion here, since cohesion is all about having relative methods together. You're gonna see that handle command, it is a handling command for C, create account, li, lo. You're gonna see that's just in a minute that we are going to taking input for this guy, for this command, and you're gonna see that we have multiple if statements for the handle inputs, like you're handling inputs for this one and this one, and once the project gets larger, you're gonna update these if statements. I'm gonna update these if statements here if you're making the same approach of handling inputs and handling commands. So bottom line is that that's a little bit less cohesion, but we are going to refactor this into ECB, and it's going to be a little bit more in the future. So let's for the time being create account input, and let's say that it's instance method, and all it does is that it takes inputs for username, right, password, right, and the password is it's an integer, so I'm just gonna cast that. You can have a try and accept to make sure that this is not gonna go south. And we have email. All right, and this is it. This method should return both of them: username, password, and email. Right. Now, once we have username and password and email, we can send it to, you guessed it, to create an account from account object, right? Or we can send it actually to account.account.create account, right? That didn't make any sense, but remember that we have here accounts.account and there is a class method that is called create account. So we can just create account from the class method, right? So you would say that create account inputs gets me the necessary arguments to actually invoke create account. So I can pass these arguments to the create account from the account class, right? But remember, the account class is or the create account is a class method. That means that all of what we've seen so far is that in order to invoke a class method, you need to have the class. And remember, what we have here is an object that is being sent in the main script. There is an object of the main script that is sent. I really forgot to do that. There is an object of the main script that is being sent to the UI terminal. That's the UI terminal. So we have an object of the account that is stored inside the account object, which is an instance variable inside the UI terminal. Right, so it's an instance variable inside the UI terminal object that has another object of the account, right? So bottom line is what we are sending to the UI terminal is basically an account object, not the account class. And in order to create an account, we need, as far as we know, we need the account class because this is a class object, or this is a class method, I'm sorry, right? So what is the case here? The case here is simply that, well, in order, if you really need the class, you can just say from account import account. But notice that I warned you about this from the beginning. I warned you that multiple imports are going to be the reason for high coupling, right? And totally, you do not need the import here, since you are typically being sent to that UITerminal, the account object. So why even bother about the import? All right, I know that you need the import just for the sole purpose of doing this. After you take the create account inputs, which are username, password, and email, right? So you're going to store them inside variables, right? And then send these variables into the account, the create account method from the account class that you have just imported, right? So you want to do something like this. Create account, send these guys, right? I know that you want to do this import just for this sole purpose, this line to happen, right? Well, let me just give you a new hint about Python. Let me teach you about a single new thing. Let's open up the Jupyter Notebook. Right? Let's make a very quick class that is called class A, and let's say that class A only have class method, one class method that is called something like print something. I don't know. All right, let's call it print statement. All right, and it is a class method, and all it does is that it literally just prints something. So this is all what does class A do. Now, if you think that class variables or class method can only be invoked from the actual class like this, then this is partially true. What I never told you about is that actually, if you have an object of some class, the object, not only the object can call instance methods by default, but it can also call methods of the upper level, which is the class level. So if you have an object of A, the object A will definitely be able to call instance methods, like methods that have self in them, and they can actually, any object of A as well can actually call any method from the upper level, meaning that they can actually call methods from the class level, or method, or what we call class methods. So A can as well access print statement, and it will do the same thing. So bottom line, if you have an object, you can only not create the or call the instance method, but as well you can call class methods, right? So having this in mind, I don't really need that import anymore. And if I have the account object, from the object itself, I can check the class level or class method levels, and I can call the create account, right? So if I have the object, having the object is just enough in this case, right? And we're back to low coupling. And so on. So let's continue. So the command was found to be li. Then I'm going to call the function that is going to get the login input. Right, so that function would be something like this, where I'm going to be asking these two lines, and I'm going to be returning password email, that. I'm going to call login inputs. Login inputs is going to return some stuff that we need to store inside these two variables. And from account object that we have created in the main or bootstrap file, which is this guy, I'm going now to call login. What did we call it in the account? Is it just login, right? It's login, yes, just login here. Yeah, so we're gonna call login, sending password and username like this. LF, let's say that the user, we only have 3 commands here, so things are, for the time being, are manageable, right? And now this doesn't really need any inputs. It's just gonna call accounts.log out, logout, like that, right? And I think that's it. Alright, I think this is the time to test our code. Let's go back to, notice that handle inputs, oh, that's, so handle inputs here is going to manage the input taking and creating accounts, logging, so that's really important here, right? There is something that we want to emphasize too. I think that's enough, right? Since create account, it's gonna have its own print statements that's going to tell you, whether the account is created, whether you logged in, whether you log out. Maybe I can just have an account. Let's go back there. So we have print statements indicate. We have also print statements indicate that account has been created or not. Maybe in the logout we would want to have something that says logged out. You have been logged out like that. Okay. Now let's go to the bootstrap and just, I think this is it. All right, let's try to run this. Let's enter nothing. That's fine. Nothing gonna happen. Now let's say exit. How did we type that? Exit. Oh my god. All right. That is a mistake. This should be exit. Wow, I did this multiple times. Alright. Okay. So exit is going just to break out of the loop. Now let's try to create an account. Let's say that this account is going to be, I want to have a name, let's say Kareem. Kareem, like that. Alright, something is wrong. Yeah, I knew that this is going to happen. Okay, so account object is not defined. Let's take a look. Where is that? It's in UITerminal line 17 and handle inputs. Line 27. So what did we call it? Oh, yes, that is a very naive mistake. Okay, I think that's it. Now let's try one more time. Create account. Green. Something like that. gmail.com. An account has been created. Let's take a look. We have Kareem right there. Okay, then now let's try to log in. Oh, something is up. UITerminal has no attribute login inputs. So we have done something wrong with the naming. Login inputs. Yes, we did. There is an S missing. Alright, let's try to log in. And let's log in with my. Alright, so email is not defined. Where is that? Again, in login inputs. It's the same mistake. Yes, we don't have a login here. That's true. Oh, I'm sorry. You are logged in, and now I'm logged in as Kaza. Let's log out. You are logged out. We are back to the first view, and that's it. Okay. Okay. So let's update the class diagram. We've added a couple of stuff here. We've added the prompt, right, which is a string. We've added the command, which is a string as well. We've added get prompt handle command, and that's a method. Handle inputs. We've had as well get prompt, we've had login inputs, we've had create account inputs, we've had display options, and we have display options already there, right? So that's basically the UITerminal. Okay, and that's my first part of the system. If you did this so far, if you understood this so far, then that's totally fine. The kind of refactoring that I'm going to do now is totally optional. This is just wanting to maintain somehow a cleaner code, a cleaner version of this code. So instead of handling inputs, specifically calling different functions, I just want to have some kind of a function that is being called universally, some kind of function that whenever I say self, that function can be called run. Whenever I call run, right, so that function is going to run the specified action needed to perform the following functionality, which is in this case creating an account. And run here will, for example, trigger the action that will log in, and run there is going to trigger the action for log out. So how can we do that? So let's say that each time run will take a specific command like that. We don't really need to send it. I think we don't actually need to send the command there since it's internally in the system, right? So what we'll run do is the following. Let's say that I have a dictionary that is called actions. That dictionary is going to contain some cool tricks here. Well, first of all, the dictionary is going to have a key for every command, right? CA, LI, and LO, right? Again, you don't have to do this in your project. I'm just giving you extra details. Maybe this would help. That's just to write cleaner version of code, right? So CA would, as you saw there, CA would invoke this function, right? So I'm going to put the body of CA, which can be found the body of create account, right? The actual definition of create account that can be found in the account object, right? That can be found in the account object. That actual definition, this whole thing, I'm going to put it in that key as a value, right? And again, just to emphasize, if you understood what I've done so far, you don't have to do this. So I'm just giving you a way to write cleaner code, all right? So I'm going to put the definition of that create account method inside as a value inside that key, right? For the same thing, I'm going to use the li, right? And I'm going to take the login body definition and put it inside that key as a value. And finally, log out is gonna be like so, and that is it. Now, where is the run function, you may say? Now we are going to define the run method. Now what the run method is gonna do is the following. The run method is going to check what kind of command has we set? Like handle command is going to be invoked, and from that reply that the user is going to enter as an input, we are going to send handle command. And if the reply was containing one of these guys, so the command is going to be updated as well, right? So just in case, and maybe the reply isn't any one of those, by the way, right? So maybe the reply isn't CA or LI, maybe it's something else. So what I want to do is that I want to access the body of the function that I need to run based on the command. And what I mean by that is that self dictionary, that actions dictionary, I'm going to, it's a dictionary after all, so I can give it something like li, right? If I want to perform the login, right? If the command is login, and I have taken the inputs login, maybe I want to perform login, right? So I want to run the login function, right? So I can do that by providing the key, which is li, to the actions dictionary, and hence that body of create account, or that body of login in this case, is going to be placed inside action variable. And now action can be treated as the login method because it has the body of it, so we can call it. This is exactly similar to calling login like that. All right, but the thing is, login actually needs some kind of variables. It needs some kind of parameters, as you see here. It needs a username and a password, right? So where do we get these? And notice something, maybe the command that we send, maybe it is a CA. So in this case, what is going to be ran is that line, right? It's gonna be that line, right? And the create account, if you look closely, it's gonna take username, password, and email. So as you can see, the arguments are changing. So how can we deal with that, right? First of all, the actions should be taking the key that is stored inside self.command. That's one. Secondly, maybe the self command has been like something else. Maybe it is storing something that is not a key inside the dictionary. So in order not to have my dictionary complaining and raising a key error, I can just use the get instead of the bracket notation, right? And that's one. Two, how to handle the different arguments. The create account takes username, password, and email, and the login takes only username and password. So how can we deal with that? We can just add a variable that is called arguments, right? It's an instance variable that's called arguments, and I'm going to set it as none, right? Now, these arguments are basically going to be what I need for every function of those to run. For example, if I am looking for creating an account, I'm looking for these three, which can be returned from the create accounts inputs, as you see, right? Let me open up the testing.ipymb or the notebook to show you a quick thing here. Right? Let's have a method that is called something like define. So it's called define func, and this function is gonna take name, age, role, and it's just gonna plainly print them back. That's simple, right? So let's say that if you want to call function, you can just simply say like that, and it would work, right? Now, other way to call function, it's a little bit fancier way to do that, what we call as unpacking at calling level, meaning that I can send the same set of arguments, but in this case I'm just gonna send them as a sequence. It doesn't matter really the sequence, what it is. It can be a list, it can be a tuple, it is just a sequence. But in this case it's gonna raise an error telling you that you are sending one element, which in this case it's trying to take it and put it inside name, and it's telling you that you are required to enter two positional arguments, which is age and role. right? So the trick to unpack these three elements is to use the asterisk. This is called a stored expression in Python, right? So the asterisk is gonna unpack these at the calling level. So it's gonna take the first element, put it in name, the second put it in age, the AL put it in role, and you're gonna see that the same behavior is gonna work with you, right? This is the reversed way of the double star coargs that we have done inside the stored files in the write or in the update method. In the update method, we actually send to the update the actual separated version of the parameters. Like if you remember here, we were sending the separated version of the parameters. We were sending the keywords separated, and the write method or the update method using the double stars, it used them and it aggregated them via the double stars into an actual dictionary, where it's reverse the case for one star or the single star, where you send the aggregated version and it just separates them to actual three variables or three values, right? So we can use this trick as well in our code, right? So we can do this. So instead of, while we are taking inputs, which is basically username, password, and email, in order to serve for the create account function as arguments, we can just say that instead of doing that and instead of this return, I'm gonna take these guys, put them in a list or a tuple, whatever you want to put them in as a sequence, it's up to you, and set them inside the args variable, right, that we have initialized by none, right? The same thing is gonna happen for the login input, but it just takes username and password, right? And once we know the command, let's say that self command is basically li. So now we are gonna get the method function or the method body of the login, which is the value. This is the body of that login method, and we're going to store it inside function. Now we would want to say if self.args was actually there, if it has something that is not none, that means that it got these values from either the create account inputs or the login inputs, right? And that means that I can do the following. I can call the action, which is going to be the action in this case to run, is basically either the login or either the create account, because only in these two cases, in these two commands, these are where we actually take inputs, and these are where we actually get to have username and password as values as inputs from the user. But the login, there's no inputs for the login. There's no arguments in the login. I'm sorry, for the logout, there's no arguments. There is no inputs for the logout. It's just that logout with braces like that. That's it. So if there were arguments, I'm gonna take these arguments, which is going to be a list that going to be set by either one of these two functions inside the self arguments, and I'm gonna take that self arguments and I'm going to pass it into that dictionary, and I'm going to unpack it at calling level as well, right? And if it was not, meaning that the self argument was none, that means that the method that we are looking to invoke or the command that we are in is the logout, right? So I'm just gonna call the action as it is, right, like that, right? And that's basically it. And now I can call the self run, right, without worrying too much about what kind of method that I'm running. And these methods do not actually store any or return any values. The inputs for the create account or the login inputs, they don't return anymore. So I can just stick to that, and let me try to run the bootstrap file one more time. Just try to say create account, and let's say I don't know, ID, and it's gonna work just as we know. Right, so it works, and you can check either the data.json. You're gonna see that you have ID there, and that's it. So I'm going to do the last thing to update that class diagram with actions, which is basically a dictionary. and self arguments is going to be a list. What do we do? What did we have else? Now I say that we also have the run. I think that's it. Yeah.